Hi there, Anne here from Zevo Health. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. Thank you so much for joining me again for our masterclass video series on imposter syndrome. So in the previous episode, I would have focused on the psychological effect of experiencing imposter syndrome, how it affects us and why it's important to acknowledge it, first of all, and to get a handle on it. So for this particular episode, I'll be looking at how it shows up in our everyday lives. So the kind of habits and behavior that we would exhibit that might indicate towards a sense of imposter syndrome. So how it can come out in our work and the kind of things that we can do within our own real life experiences that might point towards imposter syndrome. Again, I would invite you to reflect on each of these particular scenarios, and if it is something that you are familiar with, or perhaps you know somebody in your life who exhibits these types of behaviors, just to really name it and make that your starting point going forward. The type of ways that imposter syndrome can show itself in our lives: perhaps you are somebody that piles on the workload. Now, this can be in your workplace or this can be in a home setting. So if you're somebody that takes on more than you can get through and you can't say no to anything, and you feel as if you have to put the hand out for everything and you have to take everything on at your own peril basically, and your workload is piling up and up and up and there's no sign of it kind of dwindling in that sense. And the real kind of crux of this is the fact that when you do have imposter syndrome, when you're suffering from an experience of imposter syndrome, you're afraid to have emotional boundaries around saying no to things or around honoring your own limits. So that's the reason why you would take on everything that's coming and that you would say yes and put the hand out for everything. There's that kind of fear that if you stand up and say no to somebody or to something, then you're going to be found out. Obviously, this is something that can cause a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and it can have a really distressing effect on your quality of life as well. So perhaps you're somebody who is afraid to have those difficult conversations in work. This can be another behavior that could point towards imposter syndrome. So perhaps you're afraid to start up a conversation with somebody in your working place. Perhaps it's a manager or a boss, and you're afraid to get into a situation whereby there is a chance of the conversation leading towards somebody revealing your real self or the real you. If somebody is suffering from imposter syndrome, they're more likely to shy away from those situations to keep themselves kind of under the radar as such. The same would go for selling themselves or putting themselves forward for new projects or an increase in salary. Anything that can lead towards that conversation. So another real life situation where work comes first and it's only work that you focus on. So you don't leave yourself time for switching off. You don't leave yourself time for breaks throughout the day. You don't even leave time for extracurricular activities. So you focus on the work. You take your work home with you and you carry it through just in case you're missing out on something. And of course, there has to be a sense of a kind of a work-life balance, and there has to be pacing throughout the day and throughout the week where you allow yourself to stop, rest, recharge and refocus so that you can kind of be your best self going forward. So if you are somebody that focuses on work and that is your whole life, this is something that would point towards that sense of imposter syndrome as well. And of course, this kind of life and this idea that you're not allowed to take breaks or that you have to take your work home with you, obviously that's going to have a knock-on effect on job satisfaction as well. And it's going to create a kind of a negative environment whereby when you think about work, you think about that feeling of stress, or you think about that feeling of burden or perhaps resentment, or you feel as if there is nothing else to your own particular identity other than work. So that can be a difficult thing to go through in your own process, and it can be a difficult thing to kind of navigate from an emotional perspective as well. So that's it for this particular episode. In the next one, what I'm going to be doing is looking at practical and simple ways that you can tackle imposter syndrome. Tune in.